Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And I wanted to bring this chart up again. I talked about it in the previous video a while back, but I wanted to bring this up again because I've been brainstorming about this stuff for the last 2 days. I feel for T-Mobile, the worst is yet to come. So I made the video recently, The Truth About T-Mobile, and that's really how they're moving, right? They're now a big company, lots of corporate activity, lots of buybacks and dividend. So that's how they're moving now. That's how we have to judge them. They're no longer for the consumer. They're no longer the Un-carrier. And I disclosed that in that video. Well, in this video, I wanted to do a brief comparison of AT&T and Verizon against T-Mobile with the free cash flow. So T-Mobile's free cash flow is guided for this year to come in between $13 to $14 billion. And then by 2026, they want to get to a free cash flow of $18+ billion. Now, you, the consumer, might ask, how is T-Mobile getting there, right? And that's what I wanted to disclose and explain in this video, why the worst may yet be to come. So if you're looking at AT&T's free cash flow, they just upped it recently to 60 at the quarterly earnings to 16.5. That's a guidance. That's 16.5 billion. And Verizon disclosed they would be somewhere at a $17 billion free cash flow. Now, Verizon and AT&T, that is to be expected. Why? Because they have very scaled businesses. AT&T has a scaled fiber business that's a great ARPU play, right? They don't pay any crazy subsidies to compete there, right? They're not giving away free phones. The only subsidy they have there is the router. And if you buy that at bulk, it's reasonable. So that's a scaled business that they continue scaling. If you guys saw the quarterly earnings, they almost added 300,000 customers that are paying, an average of like almost $60 on that ARPU. So that's a scaled business for them. Enterprise, that's another scaled business for them. They have big share there. That's been a Verizon and AT&T play for as far as I can remember. Then AT&T has FirstNet, where they compete very well, and they're established in rural. So you might say a $16.5 billion, is reasonable, and that might, for some, that might be even too low based on all of the businesses that they're scaled in. Same with Verizon. If Verizon gets to that $17 billion free cash flow, they're scaled in rural. We know that they have the presence there. They have perception there. They're scaled in enterprise. They have Fios, and that's only on the East Coast, but they're still expanding within that footprint, and they're still growing there. They have, they supplement that with fixed wireless access, which you guys have seen is growing at a rapid pace. And then they're the largest consumer. They still have the largest consumer base. That's, of course, very scaled. So for them, the $17 billion may be normal, right? And then, of course, both of them pay dividend. AT&T and Verizon, they pay dividend. They don't do buybacks, but they pay dividend. So you might say, okay, 16.5, 17 billion. That's going to accelerate. Their CapEx comes down. They might be at 18, 19, 20 billion dollars. But keep in mind, they have scaled assets that they're adding to that. It's not just coming from the wireless side. They're not just pure wireless. So the reason I say the worst is yet to come for T-Mobile is because where is this coming from for T-Mobile? They're not scaled in enterprise. They're barely establishing a rural footprint. And they don't run a wireline business. They're adding fixed wireless access customers from the wireless side. They're trying to get into fiber, but that's not scaled. They're barely getting started in all of those that I just mentioned. Same with FirstNet, with first responders. They're barely getting a footprint there, and that's very minimal. So where is that $13, $14 billion coming from? And then that $18 billion by 2026? If you guessed it, it's coming from the consumer. This is all strictly coming from the consumer side. So how has T-Mobile been moving? They've been adding fees. They've been adding new price plans that are priced higher. They started forced migrations, which they're claiming now that it's at a 1% scale, but that's probably going to get higher. So that's why I say the worst is yet to come. The consumer is going to pay for this. Right? Think about everything that T-Mobile is currently paying for and trying to get, right? They had two separate 600 megahertz transactions. One with Columbia Capital for $3.5 billion. So I think that's already behind them. They might have another payment due or so, but that should be mostly done. But that's a payment nonetheless. They have the Comcast leasing, and then they're set for purchase in like 2027, 2028. They had a payment due for Auction 108. That one wasn't too expensive, but that's still like $800 million that are being paid. They're still trying to acquire Mint Mobile. That's going to be in the billions. That hasn't been approved yet, but that's another payment. They still have one more payment due outstanding for the C-band DoD, according to the company. And then they still have a $19 billion dividend and buyback that they're getting into, which is going to total a $60 billion investment back into the stock, or back into investors. So if none of the other businesses are scaled, where is it coming from? It's going to come from you, the consumer. That's where it's coming from. So the moves that are coming in the future, the consumers are not going to like. I don't know what they are yet. I'm speculating. But many are not going to like it. And T-Mobile has to be aggressive to get there because they got to achieve the guidance. Right? And you might say, well, wait a minute, T-Mobile is still growing. Eventually they'll get there. Well, let me remind you, they guided a guidance through 2025. They will be at 20% business, 20% rural, and 7 to 8 million fixed wireless access customers. The 20% rural share and the 20% enterprise share, that's under indexed. That's not even fair share. So that's still not really truly scaled. It's more than what they have now, but they're not at a 30 or 40% share. So the revenues and profits from that will help, but how does that get them to the $18+ billion free cash flow? When you compare that to Verizon and AT&T that have really scaled businesses. AT&T operates by 2025, they will have 30 million households on their fiber with a close to $60 ARPU, which could be going up by that time. So let me disclose a number to you guys that I heard recently, and I'm confident in that. I don't have any documentation, but I heard it on the internal town hall that AT&T had. When AT&T gets into a neighborhood and they outfit that neighborhood with all fiber to the home, within 12 months of them being in that neighborhood with its fiber product, they get 1/3 of that neighborhood onto the fiber. Now, I don't know what that number looks like at 24 months or 36 months, but within the first 12 months, they get 1/3 of the neighborhood to sign up. That's a pretty big deal. Right? And that's just one business that they're scaling, and that's a very premium product that has long-term return. AT&T disclosed $1 spent on wireless and $1 spent on fiber. Fiber has the higher and bigger return. Just to throw that out there for you guys. So that's a big deal. And then they have FirstNet that they're scaling. They're at, I think, 5.3 million now added. They have presence in rural, and they have large share in enterprise. So they're not reliant. What I'm saying is Verizon and AT&T are not just reliant on a pure wireless play where all of that has to come from the consumer. 99% of this free cash flow for for T-Mobile for now has to come from the consumer. So I'm just making you guys aware, as some of you are still thinking about John and the Un-carrier, that's been done. And now that we're seeing these moves, that was done when the merger closed. Now they gotta make the dough. They gotta get to these numbers. And until they can scale the other businesses to a substantial size to create that balance, the consumer is going to be stuck paying for this. So make sure you guys stay tuned, right? Be on the lookout. There's going to be moves coming. Right now, as it stands, the math is not mathing. So in the future, T-Mobile will have to pivot and make changes to make the math make sense. And right now, the math is starting to make sense, right? With the forced migrations, the higher plans. But in the future, if they can't get the people to migrate enough and more of them opt out, they will have to make other changes, like adding more fees. Taxes and fees may be going away, right? That's just some stuff that I'm throwing out there. But what I will say, and I'm confident when I say this, the worst is yet to come. So make sure you guys stay tuned, like, share, subscribe, follow my social media outlets. This is Tyrone with Tech Life. See y'all in the next one. Peace.